Erev Tov Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. A deadly terrorist attack in Jerusalem, killing 4 people and injuring as many as 15. It is a very tragic day in Jerusalem for the Israeli people, as well as no doubt for the government as well. Prime Minister Netanyahu, our thoughts and prayers are going out on this January the 8th, 2017. Only about a week away before in fact, it is exactly 1 week away before the United Nations will convene again to try to divide Israel for the 4th time. We'll go into that in just a moment. Let me first look at this accident that we see that took place here. You're seeing scenes there by RT that have posted this on their channel as well. I do need to warn you before we go any further in this broadcast here, we will be looking at the actual video footage that's been released by the Israeli authorities that shows this massive truck here. Looks like a 2-ton truck, maybe a little bit bigger than that, that rammed into a bunch of Israeli soldiers that had just gotten off of a bus there. And a CTV footage actually captured the incident there. Running the people over, backing up, trying to regroup again, and then ramming them down again. Now it is at a distance, about 30 meters away from where the incident actually occurs, the video footage there, but nonetheless it is very troubling. He did drag some of the people underneath the truck there, and again, like I said, very troubling what happened there and the number of people that actually died in this incident here. So let's look a little bit. It says, a truck rammed into a crowd of soldiers in Jerusalem, killing 4, injuring 15. We already know the driver of the truck was shot in response to the attack. Prime Minister Netanyahu said that the predator may have been a supporter of the terrorist group Islamic State. We don't have a confirmation on that as of yet, though. It is a terrorist attack and a ramming attack, a police spokesman said on Israel radio. It also said police said 3 men and 1 woman, all in their 20s, were killed. And it added that the truck driver targeted a group of Israeli soldiers who had just gotten off a tourist bus. And by the way, when we look at the footage here in just a moment, I do want to tell you that what's very disturbing in this case here is that one of the issues that I've really been baffled about is why Israeli soldiers in uniform are not always armed at all times. And I have to bring this up. I think it's very important for the Israeli government to be aware of this, because so many of the soldiers are fleeing rather than facing the enemy that is doing this. And of course, there were, as you can see by the truck's windshield on your screen here, there definitely was no doubt a couple of people that did take aim and take out the driver that was killing these people. It's actually heavier than a 2-ton truck. This truck here actually has a crane mounted on behind the cab there. No doubt a garbage truck or debris picking up truck of some sort that can use a grapple there that picks it up. So it makes it even heavier to be crashing into them. A Mercedes large truck there that did this. We're going to take a look at the footage here. And as I stated here, it is a troubling video to be watching. But I want people to be able to see this, because to me the important part behind this is the fact that it actually did happen, because there's so many staged events that are not happening, and I think that people need to be aware that these things do happen. Now the soldiers you see close up are not the ones that are going to get hit. It's going to be the ones back here in the background, and in just a second you're going to see this truck come plowing through there. And he's gonna take out a bunch of them. And again, just very, very sad indeed to see something like this happen, of this magnitude, especially. Let me just kind of move it forward a little bit here, because they have it playing for some time before they actually you see the truck entering into the footage there. Now the reason it's moving around is because there it is there. They just rammed them down, and he's going to take, he goes all the way over here to the far right of your screen there. He backs up. He's actually dragging some of the people there. He's trying to turn around and come back and ram the people again. By that time, security forces are already beginning to try to stop him by shooting into his window. They run around. They begin to start shooting at the truck there to get him to stop. and finally they're able to kill the driver of the truck there, to keep him from killing more people as a result. And you know, I have to say for the Israelis that there's not much more that you could do in a case like that. Again, I'll bring it kind of frame by frame here, going slowly. I was going to mention to you the reason why the camera was moving is because they're inside the monitoring room there, and they were filming it off of the CTV footage itself. That's why the camera was shaking as they're moving. There's your truck there in the left-hand screen. He is moving pretty sportily there. And then, of course, right here, you got that little bit of a fuzzy look there, and that's because of the plowing into the crowd there. You know, the camera taking so many different shots there. CTV footage is a much slower frame speed than what we have on, you know, like on our news cameras and stuff. So you just get you'll get the whole thing, but you don't get it like what we would get there. Let me just play it over again, and you'll see him coming in here in just a second. And again, on this here, we could see that the camera was being, you know, there he comes there. You actually see him. It's very, very disturbing there. You can see the dust flying up as well, which kind of blurs the image because it's a very poor quality on the CTV footage there, being at that distance there. But you see the truck backing up. All the soldiers are moving in the other direction. A lot of these guys are actually carrying weapons, you know, but a lot of times the soldiers are not allowed to have their ammo in the weapons. And that's just disturbing to me as well. And you know, there is a number of them, quite a number of them, that are going to and going after the truck itself, but very disturbing. And you know, guys, let me tell you something. I'm very concerned that we're going to see more acts like this in this coming week here, leading up to next Sunday when the United Nations meets to again to decide the fate of Israel, being decided by the world rather than the Israeli government itself. And I've been troubled about this. You know, there's many times I have stood when I see acts against the Arabic people that is done wrong, especially in the case, say, even with the Palestinians, when we had this one young lady that was, the two girls that had the scissors that were attacking the people there, trying to stab people, and in the case of the security guard, he shoots them and shot the second one and killed her when she was already downed by a private citizen. And I stood with the Palestinian people because to me it was totally wrong that the security guard shot and killed the second girl in that act there. So I try to be very unbiased in the approach that I have. But what you have to understand, when it comes to Israel and this issue of the dividing of the land, and I am not for annexing, I don't believe that it's right for the Israeli government to go and annex land that belongs to Arabic peoples that are living already in the land. It should, though, be one state and not two states. I do not agree with it being two states. The issues that I have on this, though, is that we have to look at the fact that the United Nations, even when they were the League of Nations back in the 1920s, after the First World War, and the British Empire toppled the Ottoman Empire, you have to remember there were already about 80,000 Jews living in this region of the world because the Ottoman Empire had allowed Jews to begin to buy and purchase land, and they were doing so around the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, as we call it in Hebrew, and as well as in Jaffa or Joppa there, around modern-day Tel Aviv. So there were a lot of Jewish people that were coming, especially from Iran, Iranian Jews, etc., what we would call today Iraqi Jews and stuff, that were coming and were settling in the land peacefully amongst their Arab neighbors. It was the British Empire, though, that changed all that by the Second World War, and then they made what they called a British Mandate, promising that the Jewish people would get a large portion of land for a Jewish homeland. They called it Palestine. So what we call today as Palestinians were not the Jews that it was promised for. It was promised for the Jews that we see that are living in this land today. And at that time, including Jordan, there was less than 400,000 Arabs living in the entire region. Even Mark Twain talks about this being a very desolate land, hardly nobody inhabiting this land. But it changed hands, and we've done a broadcast on this before. It changed hands 4 times, according to the United Nations, when they were under the League of Nations, and then changed their name to the UN. 1920, Israel was promised a homeland that included both everything west and east of the Jordan River, that is, including the modern-day country of Jordan. In 1922, the League of Nations changed their mind. The British government wanted to be able to give for a prize to King Hussein's son, Abdullah, and they gave him 71% of the land that they had promised for a Jewish homeland to him as a reward for helping them battle the the Ottoman Empire. So that changed. And they said everything that was west of the Jordan River, that would now become a Jewish homeland. Then there was a big buff and everything over the few Arabs that were living in this region. They didn't want any Jews in here, any more that they were already there anyway. And so they began to argue with the authorities, or with the British at that time, who were governing this land. They said, we don't want any Jews coming to this land. We don't want them to have a homeland. But there wasn't that many there in the first place. And this is why they wanted to make it a Jewish homeland. So by 1947, Resolution 181, now the UN was again dividing the land. They'd already promised the Jews two times before that, 1920 and 1922, to have this huge big tract of land, including the country of Jordan today. And then they divided it again in 1922, gave Jordan to the Jordanian Abdullah, Hussein's son, and now everything to the west of the Jordan River was supposed to be for a Jewish homeland. But then that changed once again in 1947. Now the UN decides that Jerusalem is not going to be for the Arabs or the Jews. They're going to give it to a foreign entity, while the United Nations kind of governed what goes on in this particular region. We do realize later that that was meant for the Vatican, not for anyone else, and we know this because in the Oslo Accords of 1993, when former Prime Minister and deceased Shimon Peres made the deal called the Oslo Accords, effectively giving Jerusalem to the Vatican. That was in a wire that was brought out by the late Joel Beinerman, investigative journalist, and Barry Chamish, both of them exposing that the Vatican was to get Jerusalem. But of course, as I said, in 1947, they were trying to then make a Gaza Strip and, of course, a West Bank, and it just didn't work. Israel fights a war of independence because the Arabs turned it down. The Jews were going to accept it at that time, but the Arabs turned it down. So they fight a war of independence. They tried to take Jerusalem because the Jews didn't want it falling into the hands of a foreign entity controlling a land that clearly, historically, and archaeologically was a Jewish land to begin with, some 2,000 years ago, of course. Again, 1967, we see the 6 Days War. Israel takes Jerusalem, and that really caused a major problem for the Vatican because that was their prize. Now the Vatican began to work with the Arab people that were living there, which actually were Jordanians and Egyptians. They were not a Palestinian people. These were what we would call Jordanians and Egyptians. We know this because when they would not allow any Jews to come or to migrate in the land between the late 1930s up to 1946, they were not allowing any Jews into the Promised Land because they wanted to see how many that Hitler could annihilate and not allow them to get into the country. During that time, they were really working on a lot of illegal immigration from Egypt and now what was considered to be Jordan to build up an Arabic population to stop Jews from being able to come in later. Well, it didn't work. The Jews did finally make it in after the Second World War. What few did survive. And it's been a bitter fight ever since for the Jewish people to claim the homeland that under the British Mandate was originally given to them, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. If we look at the promise there that was given over in the biblical account there, if we look at what was spoken by Daniel, this is exactly what would happen. We would see that Daniel would actually see where the Jews would, the land itself would end up being divided for gain. And that's exactly what ends up happening. They come in there and they divide the land for gain. I think that's verse 39. Yes, it is. And he shall deal with the strongest fortress with the help of a foreign god, whom he shall acknowledge and shall increase in glory. And he shall cause them to rule over many and shall divide the land for a price. He shall deal with the strongest fortress with a foreign god. Sounds like the Vatican and Great Britain working together. And by the way, he shall cause them to rule over many. What does that mean there? That foreign god is actually a foreign nation that has a godlike leader, the Pope of Rome. And of course, Great Britain has fought the wars for the Vatican for quite some time. And they do rule many places around the world. And even the United States is part of that British Empire. But they shall divide the land for a price. That's exactly what the British did the entire time. In 1922, they divided it for a price then. 1947, another price. Of course, 1993, another price yet again. Looked like Shimon Peres was involved in the one in 1993. Now, here we are, 2016, the UN Resolution 2334 that got passed, and the U.S. finally let it go through. And now we're faced here as we're nearing, here we are on January the 8th, headed to January the 15th, and what are we going to see again? 70 nations making that covenant of Psalm 83, a famous covenant there that no doubt, I believe, will definitely pass. And when it does, I think what will follow, many people call Psalm 83 a war. I don't consider Psalm 83 a war. I consider it nothing more than what it actually states. Israel is worried about the nations coming against them because they are gathered against them as it is. They have said, "Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. Against thee do they make a covenant." Tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites and Moab and the Hagarenes and Gibal and Ammon and Amalek and Philistia and with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria is also joined with them. Why Assyria? Well, they say Syria is in a civil war, but you know, Syria is not really in a civil war, but it is a war that has been majorly devastating to them. The reason I say you can't really say it's a civil war, I mean, it is a civil war in one case because part of the Syrian people are actually fighting against their own people. But it's 35 different nationalities have been registered as fighting in this so-called civil war against Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian army has faced 35 nationalities fighting to topple President Bashar al-Assad. Which again, that's another guy I stand beside, because I don't believe that President Bashar al-Assad has been a threat to Israel or anybody else for that matter. He just didn't go along with what they wanted to do. And that's where the problem came in. And so the U.S. has been bent, along with their allies, to topple President Bashar al-Assad and replace him with someone else. Anyway, again, a very devastating day in Israel today with this latest terrorist attack. And our thoughts and prayers do go out for the families of the victims there and for those that have survived it. And we will be praying for them. I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live. Erev Tov.